This is a team of amateurs who go to a country they've never been to before.
Cricket is a game abound by such stories which can never be true.
But why aren't there any Parsis in the Indian team now? I want some reservation on this subject.
How many of them are left?
Clayton,
That's a question you should ask.
This is so unnecessary.
Lala Amarnath, 1 century. Raj Singh Dungarpur, 100 stories.
This part I can be the expert. Cricket is still for Clayton to carry the ball there.
It's in the air. It's a 6.
Okay, Century of Stories Cricket, Republic Day special. And when you think about the country and the closeness of the country and cricket, it's almost like one and the same thing. How did it all start? What happened pre-independence? What was cricket? Where did cricket originate in a sense in India? How did we get into this glorious game? With me is Clayton Murzello, who charges 8 million rupees just to look at the camera for 5 seconds. But today he's giving us a much better rate. And he's going to take us through the life and times of cricket in India as it grew from almost a century back to where we are now. So Clayton, people don't realize the rich history of Indian cricket and where it came from. Of course, the British are very much responsible. They did some good things and some bad things.
True.
My memory of the whole thing is that this tribe of small community who punches above their weight called the Parsis, hold for music, were the first to actually push the envelope in a sense and decide to adopt British ways and customs along with this great sport, which was very much symbolic of the British in India, cricket.
That's exactly right. The Parsis' contribution to Indian cricket, the start of Indian cricket at least, can never be underestimated.
Why were they interested in it and perhaps not anybody else at that point?
Maybe they were closer to the British. Maybe their bonding was greater.
I wanted you to say exactly that.
Yeah.
They were very close to the British way of life at that point. Yeah.
And so that, that helped in getting addicted to this game, if you could call it that in those days, in those amateur days. And they took to it well. They took to it seriously.
Correct me if I'm wrong. There was like underhand bowling and all in the beginning.
Yes.
The rules had not, developed from the Parsi.
Much before that, probably.
Yeah.
Much before that.
Yeah.
And they took this tour to England and they got someone actually to help them with their cricket. A Britisher called Henderson.
Right.
A year before that landmark tour to England. And I'm so glad that, recently the Parsi Gymkhana commemorated that tour.
Right.
With a visit to England.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So the modern Parsi team was sent.
Yeah.
But I hope there were Parsis in the Parsi team though. Because
There
a
were
lot,
some.
a lot has changed over the years. Yeah.
Sadly.
Do you remember how many matches they would have played across the country in England?
No, I don't remember how many games they played.
20
But
odd,
from
maybe?
what I have read, they were quite impressive in their tour performances.
So would you say they held their own or would you say they
held
put
their
up a
own.
fight?
Yes, they held their own.
And again, keep in mind now, just if you can understand this, it's mind-boggling actually. We talk about India struggling in Australia or in England in these conditions. Professional Indian side with the kind of talent we have now. This is a team of amateurs who go to a country they've never been to before. And again, the wickets must have been seaming and swinging and,
Uncovered totally.
Uncovered totally. So God knows day 3 or whatever of any match would be impossible to play on. So not bad. But why aren't there any Parsis in the Indian team now? I want some reservation on this subject.
Well, how many of them are left?
Okay, Clayton.
That's a question you should
Clayton,
ask.
this is so unnecessary. Instead of supporting us as a fellow minority.
No, I would support you all at any time.
Yeah. All right. So they were the first group. They go to England. They make a sort of name for themselves and they come back. But this is Parsi team. They don't look at it as an Indian team in that sense. The Brits might, but we don't. We have no idea. Our national consciousness is not there.
Also, Indian cricket was helped by the princes. They put in a lot of effort and money to the development of the game.
The rich were the patrons of the game.
Yes.
Without them, let's give the devil its due. Without the rich, mostly kings and royalty, this game would not have gone anywhere in terms of...
Yeah, because you needed those financial resources to build this game.
Plus interest in the game, which they had.
They had.
Yeah.
Although they took a lot of liberties also by, getting into the team.
That's a tough
maybe
one.
Undeservingly.
Clayton, it's a bit like the rich kid fiasco that happens in where I was growing up in Bombay, for example. There's one kid who has all the equipment, so he has to play then.
But then the fabric of the sport is such that, you want to play this game. And, okay, you can understand that, they are rich and everyone wants to play this game. So maybe they were part of that also.
Looking back, I think it's a petty point to say that they were unnecessarily pushed into the 11. The fact of the matter is, without them, there would have been no 11. Like he's mentioned, all the money came from them. We'll go into some specific examples right now. But let's go back to the Parsi. So the Parsis come, they tour a couple of times. And then in the progression of things, what happens next?
The game becomes more interesting to Indians. Apart from the Parsis.
Right.
Royalty has its role to play.
Amazingly, I read a snippet where the Gujarati-speaking rich, both Muslims and Hindus, were the ones who sort of pushed it initially outside the Parsis. They're all Gujarati-speaking. The Parsis were Gujarati-speaking, the Muslims were Gujarati-speaking, and I think it was the Gujarati Hindus as well.
Yeah, and that's how the Pentangulars came into play.
Now when we talk about secularism and all, this is actually quite secular in its own way.
True.
Because you tell us. So how were they separated? How did you create the Pentangular?
Hindus,
Okay.
Muslims,
Right.
the rest, which played very competitive
Parsis.
cricket. Parsis.
Yeah.
On Kennedy Seaface.
Correct. Kennedy Seaface, for those of you outside South Mumbai, is basically that little small area of land opposite the Arabian Sea where these 4 or 5 gymkhanas slowly just mushroomed out of nowhere, out of the sea.
Yeah.
If you want to look back at the history.
I mean,
of
they
the whole
got
thing.
their allotments
Yeah.
from the British.
Yeah. And they each built a little gymkhana of their own.
Yes.
And they each propagated cricket, but it was a tribal structure. Right? The Hindus would play for the Hindu team, the Muslims for the Muslim team, the Parsi for the Parsi team, and the rest, which I'm not even aware of, as you're telling us, is a mix of whoever.
Yeah.
If you didn't identify as a community, join the rest. Yeah.
And cricket progressed through that. I mean, it was not viewed, as communal.
And now it's time for IDFC First Fact. One of the towering figures of the early 20th century cricket in India, DB Deodhar, had one of the longest first-class careers. In fact, he is one of the only 2 cricketers who played cricket before the First World War and after the Second World War. Deodhar made his first-class debut in 1911 before the First World War started and played his last in 1947-48 long after the Second World War had ended in 1945. The other such cricketer was England's Bill Ashdown, who we get to meet in person right now. Just kidding. Now we come to the year of Clayton's birth, 1911. This is a very important point in our shaping of Indian cricket, in a sense, because the Maharaja of Patiala, Bhoops to you and me, decides to take another team, and this is a mixed team. Almost, I won't say representative of India, but definitely more people from different backgrounds are in that 11, not just Parsis.
Yeah, a mixed team, you're right. Didn't fare very well. The Maharaja of Patiala, must have forced his way into the team, although he was spending all the money. So, fair enough.
But all that changes 15 years later. In 1926, there's a gentleman whose name slips my mind. Maybe you'll remember him.
Arthur Gilligan.
Arthur Gilligan, that's the guy who brings a squad which is almost, again, correct me if I'm wrong, an MCC squad, which is almost like a full test squad of
Sprinkled
England.
with England test players.
Yeah.
And we fare well against them, especially CK Nayudu.
The
I think
legend
he
is
got-
born. Yeah.
The legend is born. He gets 100 and
150 odd at the Bombay Gymkhana, of which Clayton is a leading management committee member and disciplines people who feed cats for no reason.
legend has it that he hit a 6. I don't know whether it's from the Bombay Gymkhana or some other Maidan, but a 6 which landed on the Rajabai Tokla.
Okay, so again, let me explain this geographically for people out there, because this part I can be the expert. Cricket is still for Clayton to carry the ball there. Geographically, if we put him at Bombay Gymkhana, which is Azad Maidan, basically, for those of you outside Mumbai, the Rajabai Tower is very close to the High Court, which basically it's right there, the Bombay High Court, where the Oval Maidan is. We're looking at 2 bus stops, minimum, and possibly close to a kilometer in distance. The great Viv Richards, some of the greatest hitters around the world, Gordon Greenidge, Ian Botham, Yuvraj Singh. I mean, talk of people who hit the ball a long way. Andrew Simon, Sandeep Patil, Madhu Patil, his dad. All these people won't have done it, but legend has it, back in 1926, with those old bats, which had one sweet spot with linseed oil, you may get 2-3 inches of sweet spot in the middle. The great CK Nayudu hit a ball kilometers away and hit a clock tower.
But Cyrus, this is why cricket is so fascinating, no?
Yeah.
Cricket is a game abound by such stories which can never be true.
But again, we have to give the devil his due, because CK could hit the ball a long way. That was definite. The exaggeration apart, the fact of the matter is we had a big... because perhaps they thought Oriental cricketers are not power hitters.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you had this giant of a man who was hitting the ball a long way and who made a sort of statement that we can play cricket in many different ways. We're not just one type. What happened then with Mr. Gilligan and gang? They were impressed with us.
They were impressed. India made a push to become a test nation. And in 1932, we played the first test match.
Okay, so who was the captain in 1932? Here's the question. Once again, it was royalty. It was the
Maharaja of Porbandar.
Porbandar, which is also famous for another great Indian, but that's again a topic for another day. So we go there and we play our first test match, and then he loses the captaincy.
Yeah, there's some dispute in the team, and the captaincy is given to C.K. Nayudu.
Who is arguably the best player in the team by a margin.
Yes.
Yeah. And
although there were quite a few stalwarts in that team, one of whom went on to represent Pakistan.
Right.
Jahangir Khan,
the bowler. Yeah. There you go. All right. Mohammad Nisar and Amar Singh part of this team?
Two great bowlers.
Let's quickly talk about them because growing up, my dad used to talk to me about these two. As Mohammad Nisar is the fastest Indian bowler, although he went to Pakistan later, that we produced. And maybe for a long time, that would have been true.
Yeah.
But he was really fast. And Amar Singh was the one who moved the ball both ways.
A short pairing, but an impactful pairing.
So arguably, again, we had a very decent bowling lineup, which perhaps we didn't have for a long time after that.
And even in that first test match, we didn't, disgrace ourselves. We were competitive. Although the test match ended inside 5 days, we were in no way disgraced.
So we don't disgrace ourselves. We're in England, and then we come back. And what about our first home test?
At the Bombay Gymkhana.
We're
celebrating the 150th.
Yeah, and 150 years of Bombay Gymkhana. 1875 it started. There's no parking available, so don't come. You were saying. Bombay Gymkhana, the scene is set. Tell us who's playing.
Well, Jardine against C.K. Nayudu. Jardine of the bodyline fame.
The one and only.
Yeah. Tough captain.
Yeah.
But also a gracious cricketer.
Yeah. We're very fond of India because he was born here.
Yes. Yeah. The story of Indian cricket starts there. Although we played our first test match in 32, but Bombay Gym will always be remembered as the first Indian venue.
Homegrown test.
Yeah. And one of the 3 test centers in Bombay.
It's very difficult to imagine what it would have been like. There's some information and all that. But I'm presuming the spectators were sort of standing and watching around. I don't think we had stadia.
I don't think there were temporary stands either.
No. And again, we don't know if, the members were allowed to be close and the public were pushed behind and all that was going on. So, almost like stalls and balcony, and dress
And no one living to check also.
Well, we lost a couple of cricketers this year and they were the last ones to tell us all about this. But there's another beautiful moment in 34. A guy called Lala Amarnath, the legendary Lala Amarnath, gets 100 on debut.
Is only 100. They say it was an entertaining 100, which even the opposition appreciated and built Lala's legend, as it were.
Yeah. But you have a nice story you were telling me offline about Raj Singh Dungapur.
Not that he disrespected Lala Amarnath, although people say that he dropped Mohinder.
That's a long shot.
Very unfairly.
Yeah.
But I remember him telling me once that Lala Amarnath, 1 century. Raj Singh Dungapur, 100 stories.
Lala Amarnath, the legend of Indian cricket, bowled off the wrong foot, if my memory serves me right as well. Proper all-rounder and really
good cricketer and a very brave selector.
And
used to pick people even before they play Ranji Trophy.
Also, I remember him in the 80s when I was watching TV for the first time. When we first started watching broadcasts of India, Pakistan, etc., etc. He was a commentator as well.
Yes.
And he's the guy who destroyed Roger Michael Humphrey Binney's name by calling him Rogers Binney.
Binney Rogers.
No, he said Rogers Binney, and I thought that was the name for like 2 seasons after that. Until I read up and found out it's very much Roger. But yeah, what a guy. Absolute legend. And then a family of superstar cricketers, especially Jimmy, who followed, and Surinder to some extent.
Yeah.
Do you guys know what is as great as the cricket moment we're discussing? The feeling of watching your savings grow with IDFC FIRST Bank 7.25% interest rate per annum on your saving account. 0 charges on all savings account services and monthly interest credits. Now that's the kind of greatness we all need in our lives. What are your thoughts going back to the 34 first test match? What do you think the Indians were going through? Would it be a bit like the movie Fire in Babylon, where, there's also a point to prove from a national point of view. True. Because you're fighting so-called oppressors in a way and you're doing it through cricket.
Yeah, they must have been very determined to do well, very motivated to do well because of the struggle the country was facing politically. Again, they did not disgrace themselves. There were some quality players in that team. Then we went to England in 36. We went to England in 46. 46 was a forgettable tour. 36, the summer of Merchant and Mustaq Ali.
What a pair that would have been, no? Mushtaq Ali and Merchant.
Yeah.
One the absolute technician, one the absolute way ahead of his time T20 sort of swashbuckling batsman.
And Merchant batting on wet wickets. That's how the Kanga League started in Bombay.
Correct.
Because he felt, the batsmen are finding it great difficulty in when
On
it came
wet
to
wickets,
batting
yeah.
on wet tracks.
Yeah.
And that's how he started the Kanga League. His role was very significant.
What do you reckon? How would you rate him? We forget about Vijay Merchant, but growing up again, that was the first name that we were taught as a technician. I think 210 test matches, decent average.
Played only 10 test matches.
Played only 10 test matches, but it's very decent numbers. If you look at the numbers for that time, for sure.
Didn't go to Australia in 47 8.
Didn't go, yeah. So
Yeah,
Vijay
for
Hazare
some
is the one who
reason.
comes back with the big reputation.
Yeah. And scored his 100 in his last test match. The last 100 he
it?
scored was in his last test matches. He did not play after that. The Delhi test match against England.
Why so?
There were a lot of reasons. Business.
So they're almost doing it
But
as
he
a
was a
hobby.
strange man in that sense. You see.
He comes from a very rich family, right? If I remember
Yeah.
correctly, yeah. So, but there's also that whole thing about, this is more like a hobby. This is more like the rich were like amateurs playing in
Yeah.
India.
For a batsman of his caliber, he played only 10 test matches, and that's a big
Right.
pity.
Yeah. But we can't speculate again. We can't tell this is how good or bad. But the fact of the matter is, if you ever watch Kanga League cricket from growing up here in this part of the world, Mumbai, you can see how difficult it is for people like Gavaskar onwards, the entire generation before that, the Manjrekars and all before that,
Yeah.
who are able to negotiate these wickets. And then you have a Gavaskar playing that unbelievable innings in Bangalore towards the end of his career against Pakistan, the 96 where he almost wins the test match on a turner where nobody else could bat.
Yeah.
Because, ultimately they've had the experience of batting on these wet wickets and ridiculous wickets sometimes for so many years through.
And they looked forward to batting on the Kanga League tracks.
Yeah.
Looked forward. After every tour, they came and played Kanga League.
Yeah.
I've got a clipping which says Gavaskar came after the 74 tour and played for the other unit.
So then what happened when New Zealand toured in 2024 and batsmen were unable to play on spinning wickets? Clayton Murzello, any idea? Would you like to tackle that one?
No domestic grind.
No,
That's the only reason.
The answer is BCCI, please note, have all our players nationally play Kanga League in Mumbai at some point. That's the
But
only
for
way.
that, Mumbai cricket has to get their act together.
That's
Mumbai
true.
cricket has to hold Kanga League.
They also cancel the
as
matches
important.
too easily these days. In the old days, they'd play.
Yeah.
But,
Although weather conditions have changed, lots of games are getting washed out.
Well, yeah.
But I don't know, for some reason, Kanga League is not getting the due importance it should get.
Let's get back to our topic, which is, of course, India's birth and growth and evolution towards independence. Where we're not quite India, we're still part of the British Empire, but our cricket is getting hopefully a little better and better. But the moment we do get independence, we have that tour of Australia where we make an impact. We don't win, but we make an impact. And then you said in 51 we won our first test match.
Yeah, the last test match
Okay, which is
in Chennai,
in Chennai against.
where Vinu Mankad gets wickets.
Right. Okay. So you can see the fact of the matter is that 3 or 4 years after independence, we take our first step towards showing that we could one day be a world power. It's a long way off, I agree.
Our victories are few and far between.
Few and far between. But then 71 is or 20 years away. And 71 onwards, I would think India is charting a course to say we're a serious cricket team under Wadikar and then 83 World Cup. These are the
Let's
two
not
moments.
forget the 67-68 tour where we won 3-1 against New Zealand.
New
That was
Zealand,
the
right,
first
right.
overseas test
Win.
series
Yeah,
win.
yeah. This is Pataudi and gang.
Patodian gang after getting a whacking in Australia.
But all of them go back to the birth of Indian cricket, which is those two Parsi tours, after which we had the Pentangular, after which we had these small tours of mixed bags of people going and coming, and then finally to the 1932 visit to England and the 1934 when Jardine's England comes here, and we put up some sort of fight. Who knows that from 1932-34 to 2025, India would go from being just one of the teams that plays cricket to the powerhouse of cricket in every way.
Well, going by the talent available across vast regions, people are not surprised at India's growth. In fact, I've spoken to a lot of former players, overseas players, who say that India does not have any reason not to be number one.
It's just we've got too many options.
Yeah.
I mean, New Zealand is like 4 million, 5 million people. Australia, 23, 24
Although
million.
that should not be a barometer, but
But
still.
it makes a difference when you're
Yeah.
1.4 billion. You just have many more options, and people are obsessed with the game. We have people playing it. It's not just one group that plays it. But one thing we've left out, which we must talk about, is the growth of the Ranji Trophy. Do you know how that happened?
The national championship, there was a need to have a national championship. And we started in 34, 35. Yeah, 34, 35. And a lot of credit should go to the BCCI for Ranji Trophy.
Yeah.
BCCI get a lot of flack from all quarters. But you've got to give it to them. The way they handle, the way they organize the Ranji Trophy is not easy. And the other tournaments, of course. But especially Ranji Trophy. The way they've organized this Ranji Trophy, got talent, got scores.
Put together
Remarkable.
across pan-India. It's like the elections. It's a huge thing to do, not a small scale operation of any kind. But we've not figured out yet that there was another player, Ranjit Singh, of course, being the great star of Indian descent playing for England. But there was another gentleman, I think it was Vizzy, if I remember correctly, who was pushing for an Englishman. He wanted to, for some reason, get in the good books of Lord Willingdon. So he decided that we should name it Willingdon. So today we could be talking about the Willingdon Trophy. It was very close to the name being called Willingdon and not Ranjit Singh.
Finally, we can relate something to that.
Yeah, same
Willingdon
name.
club.
There you go. Where they do have cricket nets now, so they have come a long way.
That's
as well.
good to hear.
Yeah. But again, it's a tough one. Who else could you name our premier national tournament after if it was not Ranjit Singh? Because he had the biggest name, but you did have. At that point, you had C.K. Nayudu, you had early years of Vijay Merchant, you had a couple of options.
Duleep. But of course, there was Duleep Trophy named after him. Duleep has contributed a lot.
So you think we remove the Ranjit Singh and go with his nephew?
No,
we go with his nephew for everything. But what an interesting thing. The birth of the national tournament in the 30s, right up till now, where without playing the tournament, you couldn't go anywhere in India. I mean, you had to play the tournament to be noticed. It was the premier tournament. And now...
Unless you fared well at the... university level. There have been players who have been picked from university
Sunny.
cricket.
Yeah. Sunny hardly played
But
one,
he played Ranji.
one first class,
I'm
two first
talking
class.
about players who have only played university cricket and got picked for India.
Right. Like?
Yeah. I think Buddhi Kundaran.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wicketkeeper batsman, Farooq Engineer's contemporary.
Yeah. He played for the Railways first.
Very fast batsman also. Hard
So
hitting.
Lala Amarnath was famous for all these selections.
Oh, so he had that eye to
Yes,
pick
for
people up
talent.
from anywhere. All right. Okay, so that's it, folks. That was pre-independence cricket in India. Today, it's the biggest game ever. Anywhere you go in India, you'll see someone playing or you'll watch something on television on whatever you watch your cricket on. But back in the day, it was just a small group of Parsis who sort of started it. Then it mushroomed a little bit here and there. Slowly became a pan-India movement. And before you knew it, we were a test side. But it took a lot of years and we've come a long way. Before we wrap, IDFC FIRST Bank and I want you to stay safe online. So here's one scam which you should look out for. In recent times, online trading IPO scams are increasing, in which the scammers create attractive ads about classes for free trading tips or pre-IPO investment schemes and may even use their names and logos to seem legit. In cases like these, always verify the sender before replying to any email or a text message, and do make sure to never ever share any personal information to an untrustworthy source.